Welcome back, episode 4, Zebra Have Stripes. I always start off with the beginning disclosures. Got 4 kids, 3 baby mamas, ain't married none of them. Again, always a reminder, if you're coming here to be inspired, this isn't the place for you. Now, if you're here coming to hear about real change and make some real differences and make some real discussions about what's really going on in our community, this is where you want to be at. Now, I've been having some really good conversations with some people, and really that's kind of inspired me to kind of talk or bring up a few topics that I think aren't being discussed enough in our community. Number one, I think I'm gonna focus today's episode on the slave mentality that African people have that are still in America, and the long-term effects that still continues to have on where we are now, and the reasons why we are a lot of times in the position we are in. So the first thing that I talked to somebody about that I want to bring up is our top 10%, right? And how the slave mentality is still dictating how our wealth essentially moved. And what I mean by that, so if you guys ever read, and I want you guys to particularly focus on a few books, but really focus on the books that's talking about how, because one people that I always hear all the time, and you see a bunch of posts, is that we're not our ancestors, right? We'll beat your ass, and if you try to enslave us and stuff, right? And I want you to really look at the books explaining how slave masters broke the psyche of African people. So one of the things they talked about in a lot of the psychology books that I read on slavery is focusing on when a slave would run, right? So a slave would run, and the master would catch him and bring him back to the plantation, right? And then, so I asked people, so what you think would happen, right? And they would say, well, they would beat the slave, right? And no, and that's actually not what happened. So what happened is that the slave master would bring every slave on that plantation out, right? And he would beat every single slave on the plantation, essentially from an inch from their life, right? And didn't touch the man who actually ran. Right? And then so what that happened from a psychology standpoint, what that did for the man, it doubled down and re-solidified to him that this will be you, right? If you ever do something like this again, right? Next thing it did is it told everybody else in the plantation, right? If you ever leave, right? If you ever leave, we will do you worse than what you're getting now, right? So if we think about that in today's metric, right? What is our top 10%? What is our top 1% doing? You see, our leaders, or we consider our leaders, and where most of our wealth and our money is in our African communities here in America, right? They don't give back to the community, right? They do nothing for the community. Right? They make billions of dollars and don't do anything for the community. We still have people that are hungry. We still have people that don't have food and clothing and education, and we live in terrible places to live, right? And they can single-handedly by themselves and instantaneously change that for every African people, every African person in America, right? By just giving back to the community. They don't even have to give half of what they got. If everyone got together and gave a quarter of what they had, they still would be able to take us out of every single issue that we would have from a financial standpoint, right? But the slave mentality that they have been brought in, and how the slave master is still dictating their minds, is that he has also told them and says, hey, if you ever go back, number one, if you ever go back, you will stay there. We will take everything that you've single-handedly gotten, maybe by yourself or collectively, And we will, and you will be just like them. You will never be up here in the promised land with us, right? So, and then saying that we also do it to ourselves, right? And there's also, again doubling down. And we think about this too, like, we always talk about the people who left the hood, right? And they left the hood and never came back. Never did anything for the hood once they left, right? Or they never did nothing for the community in which they came from and forgot where they came from. We always hear that, right? Again, that is that slave mentality. And it's always, like I said, that is always reconnected by the simple sense that if you ever go back, right, if you ever give back to that community, you will end up like them, right? Our top 1%, if they're essentially singled out and told, hey, if you give back to your community, right, and start doing good by your community, then we're going to take everything that you have and everything that you work for, and your family will have nothing again, right? And obviously the fear that instills into that top 1% that tells them, saying, hey, it ain't worth it, right? And then again, going back to that majority, right, to the slaves that were left on the plantation that got beat from their life. That's again doubling down and re-solidifying to the people that are in the society that you are nothing, and we can take everything we can put you up and bring you back down. You have no control over yourself, right? So that type of psychological, generational, mental beatdown, right, has a lingering effect, right, from what's instilled into from generation to generation on the mindset of wanting to do better by yourself, right? If you have always, for generations upon generations upon generations, been told, don't ever leave this area, right? Don't ever leave this area because you'll never make it. You'll never be nothing without this, right? You've always been told, over and over and over, right? Systematically, they will never let you get away. That you were over and over told that educationally you will never be better than what you are, right? Then that gets instilled into someone's DNA, right? Just like the mental health. The mental health is just as conditional as the physical health. Heart condition can be passed along, right? Those type of traits in your DNA can be passed along, just like with your mental health. So if these things are instilled into you, then they trickle down to every single generation. That type of fear, that type of anxiety that comes from doing better with your life, and the consequences that can have, right? Not obviously from a positive standpoint, because you can see that, right? But we're talking about the negative standpoint, right? And the fear and stuff that gives to not only from the community, from the people who haven't had the opportunity or aren't able to essentially leave, right? They're saying, well, fuck that, you're not leaving us, right? We'd rather kill you, or we'd rather stop any type of progress that you have in bettering yourself, right? Because we can't have that, right? Because that means that slave master comes down on all of us for every one of us that leaves. You can't leave, right? And that's what the slave master would do. They would set that type of mindset that anybody who would ever want to revolt against the system or buck against the system, right? He would mentally destroy the mind to the point where that, first of all, nobody would want to. And the people who did want to, everybody within their own community who are facing all these issues would try to essentially push them away from that type of revolt. So if you're in it by yourself, of course you're not going to want to do it, right? Or you're saying, hey, if I do this, they're not only going to kill me, they're going to kill everybody. And that type of, and again, that type of mental beatdown, right? That type of damaging mental breakdown that you can have is more than most anyone of what color, what race, of any human being can deal with, right? And that's what we're seeing a lot of times in our communities, is the same type of slave mentality that has been instilled from generation to generation since slavery time, since the beginning of that mental breakdown. Right, since the slave masters essentially have ostracize everyone to do it. So guys, I just want to drop that little tidbit of info. Again, appreciate y'all always tuning in. Subscribe, like, comment on what you guys think about today's topic. But we'll come back to it. Again, mental health, slave mentality. How does that affect the community in which we're living in today? All right, and how's that affecting? How's it still affecting what we're still having to deal with on an everyday basis within a generational setup? All right. Again, appreciate y'all. Always again, subscribe, like, comment when you need to.